And one of the things, as a single woman I live alone, I'm not alone. Like, I make sure when I talk to young adults that being single and being lonely are 2 different concepts. But sometimes I'm alone, but I'm not lonely. I choose to not go to that spot. And again, I don't say this lightly, but I have God, and I have him in my head and my heart. I have his word in my heart, and I can go there easily. To God be the glory.
Don't be afraid of the dark. Be careful with stars. Not every light is gonna guide you, baby. Not every light is gonna guide you.
So, Dr. Kathy, today in the Celebrate Kids podcast, in this daily segment, Face in the Dark, there's a clinical child and adolescent psychologist, a professor of psychology and neuroscience that I really think has some interesting thoughts. His name is Mitch Prinstein, and he's the director of clinical psychology at the University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill. He explains that there's 2 kinds of popularity. One type of popularity is a predictor of lifelong and fulfilling life, and the other is the opposite. He says, quote, "We have some who are popular when they were young, and they would be the kind that we would call likable. However, a different kind of popularity emerges in adolescence, which we refer to as status. Those are very different types of popularity. Likability is good, and status is pretty bad," end quote. He goes on to define that likability is a popularity that's found in people who have genuine likable traits. These traits make people want to spend time with them and trust them because they are people who feel valued and included. Status popularity, on the other hand, is found in people who are influential and powerful, but not necessarily well liked. Dr. Kathy, I think this is kind of an interesting, I don't know, separation or understanding of some of the things that you talk about in your identity formation process in the book Five to Thrive, where you talk about belonging and you highlight that belonging is really an important stage in identity formation. I want to ask you, why do we need to be conscious of our kids' belonging and maybe even how they're belonging, especially when we look at these 2 different kind of ways that people might belong, where one might be popular and the other might be influential or powerful?
Belonging and identity are so connected. You and I know that. Anybody who's listening, if we think about it, who we become, our identity answers the question, who am I? We're terribly influenced by the people that we hang with. Terribly, and I don't mean that necessarily bad, but we are influenced by the people we hang out with. We teach here at the ministry, show me your friends and I'll show you your future. We know Bible verses about iron sharpening iron, and that goes in both directions. I know that I can be in a great mood, and if I'm hanging out with negative people, I'll become negative in a heartbeat. Like, it disappoints me about how quickly I can be influenced by the people around me. But the more that my identity is solid in Christ, the more that I claim that I want to honor God in my decisions, then I won't be as influenced by the belonging and by the relationships that I have or those that I desire. And Wayne, I think that we're alive to serve. When I look at belonging, the belonging question is, who wants me? Which is interesting in light of this guy's study about the different types of popularity. I think we're alive to serve. We're alive to leave the world a better place. That's our purpose. Where our purpose is to leave the world a better place. Our purpose is to glorify God. We do that by influencing people, by loving people well, by serving people well, by liking the unlikable. That's why I say, ask your kids, who did you notice who was lonely, and did you go to sit with them? Or did you just gossip about them? So our purpose to leave the world a better place is fulfilled in our relationships, which will only happen when our identity is good and our identity is whole and our identity is healthy and our identity is other centered. Our identity is, I have these abilities that can serve these populations. So, really, really important. If we don't have belonging, do we even need identity? I mean, it's an interesting question, right? Because identity, who am I? I think it needs to be that I'm alive to serve and to love, to glorify God. That's our primary belonging, would be our relationship with God. Yeah, I wish we were in the room together with a lot of people listening so we could have a
Mhm.
discussion about it. I'm gonna leave it at that. That's what I think is maybe most important right now.
Yeah, I feel like you wanna be in a room with a lot of people so you can ask them what they think, and then they can
Yeah.
answer the questions that I'm asking you because 'cause you're always on the hot
Yes.
seat, right?
Yes.
But it makes me wonder a little bit, Dr. Kathy, because the idea of the word popular is that you're part of the population, you're part of the populace, and popular means a little bit for us. It has that carries that idea and that weight of really being recognized inside of a culture or a group of people as someone who has note, as someone who is recognized. it makes me wonder then, when we look at belonging, what drives that? What drives belonging? I would even say what drives being part of the population? It seems like here that friends and acceptance really drive that belonging and drive that popularity. Is that true? Or would you say that there are other things that we should guide our kids to as they form an understanding that they are belonging inside of this culture, especially as they build up their understanding of their identity?
Yeah, I think, I've sometimes said that we have a longing for belonging. And I think that's because God created us to be known. If you look at scripture, he knows how many hairs we have on our head. Good heavens.
Hmm.
He calls us by name, Isaiah 43 verse 1. He created us to fellowship with him. He created us to worship him. He knows us. Our creator knows us. That's why we're drawn to people who know us. That's why if your children know you, they'll pay more attention to you as the dad. It's why teachers who know children's names and call them by name and meet them at the door and smile and say, "Lisa, you weren't here yesterday. We missed you." Like when children know in the knowing of their knowing that they're wanted and they're known, there's safety there, there's security there, there's joy there, there's confidence there. So that's what I think we need to understand, that the legitimate need for belonging, what would I say, Wayne? The need for belonging is legitimate. We're created for it. Isolation, loneliness, separation, it's horrible. Why do you think that criminals are put in isolation? Because somebody figured out a long time ago that that's not what they want. It's a damaging it's damaging to the soul. And one of the things, as a single woman I live alone, I'm not alone. Like, I make sure when I talk to young adults that being single and being lonely are 2 different concepts. And I'm alone a lot. I travel sometimes alone, often you or someone else is with me. I love it when you and your wife are able to both go on a trip, but sometimes I'm alone, but I'm not lonely. I choose to not go to that spot because I know that I have relationships that matter, family, friends, and I have many people I can reach out to. And again, I don't say this lightly, but I have God and I have him in my head and my heart. I have his word in my heart and I can go there easily. To God be the glory.
I love that, Dr. Kathy. It's one of those things that I think you have specific characteristics, right? And I think there's characteristics of God that are really present and evident in who he is that give you that sense. I'm maybe interpreting what you're saying a little bit through my own lens,
Mhm.
but I think that that's maybe helpful for us as we talk about building what the author calls likable traits. These traits that we want our kids to have so that they can have relationship or us have a sense of belonging or be a part of the population, be popular in some ways. When you consider your books, I think that the book on character, Parent Differently, really does a nice job of celebrating or highlighting primary character traits that drive belonging. And I want to ask you a little bit, what would be some of those traits that you think that we should build in our kids, some of those characteristics that do grow and develop and encourage and help them belong better inside of the world that God's put them in?
I love that you're bringing this up because we do believe here at Celebrate Kids that character matters. Character is what should be driving our decisions and our relationships and our purpose. It's where we should find fulfillment. So yeah, parent differently. It is. And let me remind people, Wayne, that in the back of the book Five to Thrive, which is the book that we would consider really the core foundation of this ministry, I listed character qualities according to the 5 core needs. So let me read you this list. Belonging, it's who wants me. Here are the most important ones. Back when I wrote this book: attentive, compassionate, cooperative, faithful, friendly, peaceful, respectful. Then I also added authentic, caring, cheerful. Like, I'd rather hang out with cheerful people than those who aren't.
For sure.
Devoted, and it's challenging to teach this to kids, right? To be devoted and faithful, that doesn't mean that you can't break off a relationship when you figure out that it's unhealthy, but you don't quickly change loyalties because somebody else is cooler and more popular in that moment. Gentle, hospitable. Oh, like, I don't you love it? I love teaching children, are you welcoming or not? Like, do people want to sit with you? Like, the other day I went to a luncheon at a convention and I chose to sit with a guy I never knew. Like, I could have sat alone and and hopefully prayed people would have joined me, but I was early in the room and I chose to sit next to a gentleman I'd never met before, because that's one of the things you try to do is, relate and make connections. And it was so enjoyable for he and I to get to know each other. And then it ended up that he had something in common with you. And when you entered the room, that was a fun moment. And then the other people who joined us, we had conversations. So what was I being hospitable? He was hospitable. I think we look for that. Loving, loyal, polite, sensitive, tolerant in the right way, unselfish. So those are some of the qualities. And so if we notice that our children are alone or they're choosing loneliness or they complain that they don't have any friends, like it's so easy to like, what's wrong with them? You know, why aren't they welcoming and friendly? But do we have the guts to look at our children and say, okay, how do you come across? I know somebody, for instance, who, when somebody shares a story, rather than asking for details of the story, "Hey, tell me more." "Well, that sounds so interesting. How did that make you feel?" Rather than engaging with the person who tells the story, the person I'm thinking of just begins to tell her own story that she thinks is related. And that's not examples of friendly, hospitable behavior. And then she wonders why she maybe has fewer good friends than she would want. We can help point those things out when we've earned the right to do so.
As Dr. Kathy and I were talking today, it reminded me of kind of an obscure passage that comes out of Second Chronicles 23, and I'll begin reading at verse 16. Jehoiada made a covenant that he and the people and the king would be the Lord's people. All the people went to the temple of Baal and tore it down. They smashed the altars and the idols and killed Mattan, the priest of Baal, in front of all the altars. This is a turbulent time in the nation of Israel. It's during the reign of Queen Athaliah. Jehoiada is the priest, and he leads the people out in crowning young Joash as king. But afterwards, he makes a covenant between himself and all the people and the king that they would be the Lord's people. Belonging was not framed around some charisma or appearance or a status of popularity. It was really around this covenant identity that they were going to be God's people together. This covenant scene shows that belonging is fundamentally about shared allegiance to God, not human status symbols or systems or even likability. This idea of likability in biblical terms is really expressed as covenant faithfulness. People gathered together because they trust God's promises, not because of status games or cultural norms or ideas. I think as parents, we can teach kids that true belonging is rooted in shared values and faith and not on surface approval. We can remind them that a covenant relationship, a relationship like our families and our churches, our friendships, those are relationships that can honor God, and they're most whole when they do. They create lasting identity. I think doing that can give our kids a light into what friendship looks like and even what it looks like to have true belonging inside of this cultural moment that they find themselves in. And I think doing that really is an encouragement for them. And I think could be an encouragement for us as those that are raising kids and walking alongside them. In that, I hope this whole podcast and all the things that we're doing here at Celebrate Kids is an encouragement for you. On behalf of Dr. Kathy Koch, my name is Wayne Stender. We're so thankful that you're joining us today on the Celebrate Kids podcast, this daily segment Face in the Dark. And we're looking forward to seeing you here again tomorrow.